Hello and welcome back to Anna Rose Reads the podcast. I am your host, Anna, and I am so over the moon to be sharing this particular conversation with you all today. Trevor Williamson joins me again. If you recall, he joined me for my year-end wrap-up last year, and as part of my podcaster highlight series, I invited him back on the show just to hear about his history with podcasting, to talk about the current state of whether we're influencing or commentating or what the hell we're doing in the podcasting space, the importance of TikTok dances, and so much more. I hope that you all enjoy this conversation. I'll catch up with all of you after. Hello, Trevor. Welcome back to Anna Rose Reads, the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing so well. My day is immeasurably better talking to you. It's like night
Well,
and day.
Well, thank you for coming on and thank you for saying so. I am looking to highlight all of my podcasting colleagues to get a little bit of the behind the scenes knowledge, a little bit of the history, a little bit of just like just a roundabout some coverage on the podcasting space in the year of our Lord 2026. And well, what better person to ask to come on and talk about that than you, Trevor Williamson of Sley House Presents. But in the event that people don't know who you are, do you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. So my name's Trevor. Uh, I haven't prepared any of this. Uh, Yeah, I'm a podcaster. I host a show called Sley House Presents, where I do kind of just deep dives into books that I love. That's kind of the pitch. And I do those deep dives with authors where I confront them with unanswerable questions and then see what it is that they manage to answer. And from that conversation, try my hardest to grow in some incremental way, whatever that way is. Maybe I grow as a podcast host and I learn something from that. Maybe I grow a little bit more civic mindedly. Maybe I just deepen my rage a little bit further. But whatever dimension that is, that's kind of what I take on.
Yeah, well, you do a fabulous job of that, more than a fabulous job. And my favorite thing about you is you read really, really widely. It's not like you are just a horror guy, you are not just a sci-fi guy, you're not just a fantasy guy. Like you read across the board. I mean, every genre, every subgenre, and it's like, like I think for me, I'm gonna use my frame of reference for this, but like I didn't feel super confident talking about horror in this way, like on a
Mm.
podcast, until I felt like I had read a lot of it. And I don't know if maybe you felt the same about all the genres, but like this, you read the same way across all genres, but also in a very specific way that you understand
Yeah.
what's going on kind of behind the scenes with the genre. Do you feel like that's the case for you or?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. So I've been thinking about this a lot actually, and I just had a conversation with Joe Walton and Ada Palmer, two science fiction writers who are smarter than I am by like 1,000 years, and and it was so funny because in that conversation I was like completely out of my depth. But I think it's because like when we're talking about literature in any form, I think what we're trying to do is articulate things that are often interior processes. And articulating that requires a vocabulary. And that
Mhm.
vocabulary is difficult to establish if the only thing that you've ever kind of read is like one particular thing.
Yeah.
Science fiction has a very different kind of vocabulary than romance does.
Yeah, yeah.
And romance is very different from horror. And there's so much crossover, but the vocabulary is different. And so I think in trying to approach any literature ever, we're always going through a process of what is my vocabulary for this?
Hmm.
And so I don't know. I feel like for me, the vocabulary that I have that I want to build is just like I'm constantly trying to assess where are the holes in my vocabulary
Hmm.
and how do I kind of fill that in a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I feel like comparative reading for me is sort of the way to do that. And in order to build that vocabulary, it means I also have to read very, very critically, but not in like that negative sense of
Yeah.
criticism, where it's like really what I'm trying to do is just get to the heart of any story. And like what's the heart of this? What's the question in this? And then as I read it, as I find it, can I add that question back, into my little Rolodex? And then can I chew on that? Can I pick at that? Can I try to answer that question in whatever shape or form? And that's what gives me the vocabulary.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm just voracious about it. I've always been that way ever since I was a child. I just have always wanted those things. But that's kind of why I read so widely. It's like
Yeah.
I can't quiet the voice in my head that hungers for something novel and hungers for something that I don't know that I just haven't tripped across before.
Yeah, I relate a lot to kind of that thirst for knowledge, right? And like that thirst for
Hmm.
understanding. And like not only being understood one way, but being understood in many different ways, like as we see in these
Yeah.
different kinds of stories. And I want to pick your brain on this a little bit. I feel like our genre boundaries or parameters that we're seeing in publishing, like in general,
Hmm.
are
Hmm.
really kind of like blurring, and I'm kind of here for it. um,
Yeah.
because I just read this book, Hunger and Thirst, and it's coming out from Tin House, which is
Hmm.
like a pretty, they're pretty kind of like literary, is my
Yeah.
understanding. But this is very much reads like horror to like through and through horror.
Mm.
There is kind of like that literary element, sure, but I feel like we're kind of getting, and there's, a lot of sci-fi crossover in horror. There
Yeah.
was another book that I read recently that I felt like I'm surprised that this is labeled or marketed this way and like maybe not, like it was more of I'm surprised that this publisher is publishing this. You know what I
Mm.
mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been running into that lately or not, but kind of having that vast vocabulary is really helpful for this instance of whenever things are expanding.
Yeah. I mean, if I were in grad school and, talking about this sort of thing, there'd be a lot of conversation about like postmodernism and like
Yeah.
what even, what's postmodernism and how does it kind of function, and ask a dozen scholars, they're going to give you a dozen different answers because that answer is kind of slippery, slimy. But one of the things that I've kind of understood postmodern to be is this concept of like there's nothing new under the sun,
Hmm.
and as a result, really what we're doing is we're just trying to deepen our understanding of the things that we already know or have already talked about, or we're trying to recombine elements together in some novel direction that allows us to expand the boundaries a little bit further of, kind of the some project, if you will.
Yeah.
And again, there's going to be a whole bunch of postmodernists who are going to listen to that explanation and they're going to hate me and say you're wrong, and I'm being very reductive here. But I think that what you're seeing is kind of born out of so much of the mess of like our moment,
Yeah.
and because we have unfettered access to almost anything that came before, I think it's harder and harder to be totally new. And so what ends up happening is like we're just gonna carve into the parts that are like the most us,
Hmm.
like the
Yeah.
most interesting to us. And that is going to cross pollinate in a whole bunch of different directions to where, yeah, I got a novel that was sent to me from University of Massachusetts Press.
Hmm.
And that's a it's a university press. They publish stuff that is either really deeply literary or it's going to be, kind of lit criticism sort of thing. And it was a horror novel. It's beautiful. It's very much in that literary realism field of things, but also involved stuff that was just totally bonkers. It was called The Impossibility of Crows by Kirsten Cashhawk. And a woman who has a bunch of grief and pain and doesn't know what to do about it. So she raises a crow that's as big as a Clydesdale in hopes that it can take her daughter on on a a flight. But it's so remarkably horror, and it's poetry too, and
Yeah.
it's literary realism, but it's crossing all of those different genre boundaries. And I think it's because our vocabularies are expanding. I think it's
Yeah.
because our boundaries are bleeding out, like you say. And I think that's necessary because we
Hmm.
can't just keep going. We can't just keep reinventing the wheel every time. We can't just tell Frankenstein again. There's got to be some little nuance that we discover when we recontextualize these things, when we
Yeah.
revisit these things. And to give it new breath, I feel like that's just gonna that's gonna cross-contaminate.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like bringing it up to speed, like applying our present moment or relatively present moment to maybe something that was, like a little bit older and stuff like that. That makes sense. And I think also too the richness of the like humanity of it all, like we're not necessarily setting out to reinvent the wheel,
Yeah.
but like if I got to read like for instance like your zombie novel, like your version of a zombie novel, that would look very
Right.
different than my version of a zombie novel. And like
Yeah.
I like that we're getting that deep into the work to where we
Yeah.
can tell it is somebody. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
more personal that way.
Well, and that's such a fascinating point too, because we are seeing a lot of that. There are two books, two big buzzy books on
Yeah.
the market right now called Tradwife.
Yep.
One from I think it's Sarah Langan, and the
Yeah.
other is Saratoga Schaefer.
Yep.
And even though they're titled the same thing, even though they're ostensibly about the movement of Tradwife, those two books could not be more dissimilar. They are
Hmm.
very much speaking about this particular social problem in a very distinct way. And they're speaking about it in a very distinct way, more distinct than Yesteryear, another book about
Yeah.
Tradwives.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, you're right. We all come at these things from different angles. And and thus we're going to discover new nuances. One of the best ways I think to build a vocabulary about all of these different subjects is to follow Stephanie Gagne. I know you already know this. We've
Yeah.
talked about this a lot, like even before recording, but Books in the Freezer is an invaluable tool in like if you're looking to just get into horror, you don't know what it is, and you want to sample some stuff, she's got samplers galore. But beyond just being a sampler, what she's doing is building this huge network of interconnected concepts.
Hmm.
And she is building out a comparative map in a way that nobody else is doing. Agatha Andrews does a really great job at this as well. And I think her show has evolved as she's been doing a lot of research on She Wore Black to do a bit of the same work. But it's also interesting the way that Agatha approaches it differently than Stephanie approaches it.
Yeah.
And Stephanie's approach is very multimedia and is very invested in, again, building that comparative framework in a way that I find to be really compelling.
Yeah, and I'm gonna sing Stephanie's praises a little bit more here because I appreciate how niche she can get with
Yeah.
something. So if somebody's like, I just watched, like for instance, I'm gonna say this now, but this will be out by the time that episode's out. Like if they just watched Mad Men, I recorded with her and we recorded a Mad Men read alike episode because that like we got really into Mad Men and and like but she's able to read the vibe, the culture, like the cultural moment and the vibe, for lack of a better term. That's very a buzzy word, but and it sounds reductive, but it truly is the feelings of a work, and kind
Yeah.
of curate off of that recommendations that either one, thematically fall in line or, there's various aspects, but it's a, like you said, it's a huge catalog that kind of comes
Yeah.
together. She can recommend like nobody's business. I like that's like
Yeah.
my phone and friend that I have that I'm like, if I'm stumped on
Yeah.
what to recommend, I'm calling her.
It is a singular act of scholarship to
Yeah.
be able to do that and to be able to do it so consistently as her show does, every 2 weeks to be able to come in and say, here we go, here's my annotated bibliography
Yeah.
for this weird niche of a cross section of a genre, and to be able to come in and not just present something that's like, here's a list of books, but here's a list of TV shows, here's a list
And movies.
of
Even an
movies.
album.
Yes, here's some music to accompany. It is phenomenal work, and honestly, I mean, I know her show is very popular, but maybe it's not popular enough,
No, look,
like,
hey, listen. I want that podcast to be on like an iTunes chart because I feel like
yes,
she's got the understanding of wider pop culture to like break
yeah,
into that sector of podcasting that the layperson understands what she's talking about. You don't have to
yes,
be a horror aficionado nerd to like get what we're talking about on that episode, on those episodes, you know.
100%. Yeah.
But hopefully your ears are burning right now in a good way. But I do want to pivot back to you because you are on here and I am here to talk about your podcast. I do want to back up a little bit here and I want to kind of get the history of you and Sley House Presents and kind of
Mm.
where you started with all this. And this is going to bleed into another question that I'm going to ask you to kind of like evaluate the changes that you've seen in podcasting as long as you've been doing this.
Oh goodness, yeah. So I don't, yeah, I don't even know exactly when I started doing this. I feel like we started. Um, I don't know, 2020, 2021.
Hmm.
So some backstory. So I moved to Arkansas for graduate school and attended the University of Arkansas, where I was teaching. I did my master's and then transitioned from a master's over into a PhD program. And while I was in my PhD program, I really just like spun out my wheels really hard. I did not recognize at the time that I was on the spectrum, and the way that I think about things is encyclopedic. And that's a problem when you're trying to do, a dissertation in any kind of reasonable amount of time. And so I was on an assistantship with the university until a point when I realized that my contract with the assistantship was going to run out. And I needed to either hurry up and finish the dissertation, which I was not going to do, or, I needed to find other employment. And so I started working with a community college in my region. And I my goal was always to be a professor. That was always in the cards. And I really wanted to teach, like literature.
Hmm.
I started teaching world literature in about 2013, I think, which was really funny because I had gone to, like I was like looking for an assistantship. I was like, please let me teach something so I can stay in school. And the comparative literature and cultural studies program at the University of Arkansas said, well, you're going to teach world literature. I was like, I don't know anything about world literature. There's no way. And m- my department chair at the time was like, Remind me again what your master's degree is in." And I was like, "It's in Spanish literature." And he was like, "And what's your PhD program?" And I was like, I'm comparative literature with an emphasis in cultural studies." And he goes, "How is that not fucking world literature?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay." And he handed me a syllabus and he was like, "Look at this syllabus. Do you recognize anything on here?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've been reading this shit since I was like 12 years old." And he was like, "You're overqualified." And so I was like, "All right." So I started teaching. And then when I moved to the community college, I was also teaching world literature, and I was also teaching, like intro composition, intro to reading, technical writing, just any of the kind of survey of, freshman courses that you come to teach when you work for a community college. And I was given an office, and my office mate was this dude, Jeremy Billingsley. And Jeremy was a writer. He's really into the X Files. I came into the office and he had a big poster that said like "I want to believe,"
Oh,
and I was like,
he
"Oh,
had the poster.
he
Yeah.
had the poster for X-Files," and I was like, "Oh, I like X-Files," and so we struck up this friendship together over just our mutual love of nerd stuff, and I had been growing more and more interested in horror, and he was like already a born horror aficionado. And so Jeremy had just put out a book. I read his book, and like a friendship just kind of developed from there. And then COVID hit, and and like his book went out of print, and Jeremy was like, "Well, what am I going to do? I don't want my stuff to go out of print. I really want to keep it in print. What if I started up a publishing company?" And so he kind of pitched the idea to me, and I said, if it's something that you're going to do, I, as your friend, will support you doing it. And I will give you no money ever, but I will also work for you, and I will never ask for a dime in return. And so that was the kind of the deal was like you can do your publishing stuff. I'll pitch in my skill set where I can,
Hmm.
and I just want to see you, kind of do your thing. And as we were talking about it, one of the things that I kind of urged him to do was like, I think you should build a community. Like, I think you should do some sort of outreach, something where
Hmm.
people can start to get to know who you are and what your values are and what kind of stuff you're interested in, and maybe use that as a pilot to connect with readers and, get books in front of readers. And so we started up. At the time, it was Sley House Presents Lit Bits was the name of the show.
Yeah.
And it originated as just the two of us sitting down and talking shit about the stuff that we loved, like the kinds of books and literature and movies and my bizarre Star Wars obsessions. And we were just like gonna be two professors in chairs picking apart literature that we loved.
Hmm.
And along the line, things started to change and develop to the point that we had asked for a couple of people to come on, like some different authors. All Nikatsu said yes when we had zero audience. It was an audience of three people, and those three people were me, Jeremy, and the dude who did our sound editing at the time. And Almakatsu said yes, and she showed up, and we did a bunch of homework, and then she went out and she blabbed to people that we did our homework and that we were really good at it. And from that moment forward, I was like, oh shit, I think I know what I want to do. And we started to just kind of pursue that. It became one of those, we'll do an author interview once a month, maybe once a quarter or something like that. And then gradually it got to a point where Jeremy was going through a process of adopting a son.
Hmm.
And he needed to devote all of his time and focus toward that to be a good dad. And that meant that he could not keep up with the workload of a weekly show, which was read even a short story, read a book, prep for an interview. And I was kind of like, you know what? I think I've got this. So I told Jeremy, if you trust me, I'm just gonna just unfetter me and just let me go bananas. And I promise I'll do something with it. And so he said, yeah, okay. And so he kind of gave me the keys to the car, and I shifted around. I kind of changed formats for a little bit. I thought I really needed that co-host energy because that's
Yeah.
all I'd ever done. And so I invited my wife onto the show, and we kind of did it until she couldn't keep up with my manic energy. And I was like, I think I'm going to have to pilot this ship alone and learn how to do it myself, build up that skill set. And so I moved into, had a couple of kind of pivotal interviews, I think, that opened up some doors. And then all of a sudden the show blew up, and I've been doing it 3 times a week.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about, you just said that it was this lit bit piece of just you and Jeremy going back and forth, and now quite literally, you were doing that with authors. Very
Yeah.
in-depth,
Oh yeah, I startle some. So some of them come on, kind of expecting that this is just going to be another show. Because frankly, the field of podcasting is kind of a dime a dozen.
yeah,
There are so many different podcasts out there that are kind of doing things. And I'm not going to cast any aspersions on, any specific names or anything like that. But I do think that there is a rhythm to kind of like bookstagramming. There's a
yeah,
rhythm to book influencing that doesn't always allow for deeper conversation. And
yeah.
so a lot of authors, I mean, the number one comment I get from authors when they come on the show was if they hadn't done their homework to see what I do, is kind of like, I did not expect that.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Well, you bring that up, and it's really interesting because I actually talked a little bit about this with Agatha. Like, where, like for me in particular, in my instance, I cut my teeth on I was reading horror and I started writing reviews and that was like in the
Yeah,
blog format for a site that I was writing for. But I maintained like I felt like the way to connect with the people that I could reach was on Instagram. So I started
yeah,
the Bookstagram thing and I was reaching people that way. I was making friends that way, like, made meaningful friendships that way. And then it kind of shifted into like the interview interest and then that took over and like I decided to explore that avenue. And so like now people whenever they like ask me what I do, I'm just like I'm everywhere because like I do
yeah,
still write reviews. I still do the inter I mean I'm obviously doing the podcast and
yeah.
interviewing. And that's like that's really like what I enjoy. And it's really and I don't know that I have a like sometimes I'll write a review and I'm like, "Man, this is the stuff. This is, and but then sometimes I have an interview and I'm like, "Man, this is the stuff." So you can
Yeah,
be a lot of things, but the thing with the influencer tidbit and Bookstagram is like it is limited space. You only
yeah.
have so many characters. There's only so much discussion you can have before you're talking at someone and not with
Right.
someone.
Yeah,
Um, and to me that's a big deal. So it's really kind of hard. I feel like the podcasting business that you and everybody else that we've been talking about is part of because like we're doing I feel like a lot of important work and spreading the word about books and promoting books and like,
yeah,
providing important context to books whenever we get the chance to talk to their authors. And it doesn't feel quite the same as influencership. It feels a little bit deeper than
yeah.
that. Not that like I'm not saying that one's better than the other or anything like
Right.
that, but
Yeah,
like also we're not authors either, but like, I've talked to a few people about this. Like there's no Soka Award bracket for
right. For
podcasting.
podcasts. Yeah,
And like your episode with Chuck Tingle like is one that moves a needle in a profound way for people both in the genre and not in the genre. Like that's the kind of like it's almost journalism that
mm,
takes the pulse of a moment that should be celebrated and recognized, you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
I don't know. It's a weird little spot that I feel like I'm in particular because I started with reviewing and bookstagramming and
yeah,
interviewing. But I know like too it's affecting all of us because it's like I know like there are podcasters who are on influencer panels at Stoker. And you know what I mean? Like I
yeah.
don't know that we've gotten the vernacular and that we're using the vocabulary correctly even, you know?
Yeah, like I see what you're saying. And I think that again, it's like all of these different platforms kind of require a different pattern, like a different
Hmm.
rhythm. And I think for me, what matters the most is like I want to see someone really come into their voice,
Yeah.
and I want that voice to be in service of something,
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
that is perhaps beyond just like personal enrichment. This is maybe my pet peeve, but I've talked about it. Give me any opportunity, and I'll be very, adamant against, capital or whatever. But I've been very adamant with like behind the scenes with Jeremy about should Sley House Presents be revenue bearing,
Hmm.
and because we have long since tripped past when the show could start to be profitable,
Yeah.
and I have at every turn kind of resisted that,
Yeah.
because like I don't want that to become part of the language that I speak when I'm talking about books.
I get it.
I'm
Yeah.
already doing book promotion by the kind of conversation that I'm doing. I host authors as book promo. I'm not unaware of what a publicist is asking me to do when they send me
Hmm.
a book, you know?
Yep.
Simultaneously, I don't want that to steal my voice. And one of the pet peeves that I have about like book influencing at all is that I think that the impulse to monetize steals people's voices from them. And as a result, the performance of book influencing becomes less and less about the critical literacy that I think we need
Yeah.
and more about what is popular and can end up bringing me money. And to be very, very clear and fair, I think that there does need to be food on the table for
Yeah.
people doing this work. I don't want for folks to stop doing it because they financially cannot support themselves. That I don't think is good for any industry. And I look at like what you're trying to do with your platform and putting yourself in a position to kind of make this more of a full-time thing.
Yeah.
And I think that that is so valuable. I want you to be able to support yourself and your family in what you're doing. And also, I don't want you to lose your voice because your voice is what brings such value to the conversation. So how do we do that? Like
Yeah.
that's
Well, that's like
always the question.
yeah, it's the age-old question of how you do it. And like I'm with you because this is the thing too. Like this was another thing that came up on Bookstagram however many weeks ago, and I think it kind of perfectly encapsulates this thing is,
Yeah.
people are saying that posts engagement on posts with full-length reviews that like bleed into the comments don't get engagement.
Yeah.
And I understand if doing social media and that kind of thing is your full-time gig and how you get your money and like how you put food on the
Right.
table. I understand the need to pull away from that, but you're all by doing that, you're signaling away to everybody else that thought and that deeper knowledge and that deeper whatever is not
Yeah.
as important because, like that's your that to me that felt very emblematic of all of this. And so
Yeah.
I think, for me, like, I don't think that I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna do it tomorrow. But like if you see me start doing like TikTok dances with a
Right.
book
Yeah.
in my hand,
But
then like maybe I will have, sold out or whatever you want to call it. But
but
it's
honestly,
it's it's an interesting crux of how you find a way because in order to be able to do the work for a prolonged period is like either you have a day job or some other means of income that
right.
is like kind of soul crushing and then you lose
Yeah.
your spark to keep doing it or you try and like kind of find a way to make it profitable, but I totally agree that if you're constantly chasing the money then your individuality gets lost.
Yeah, and I think like to your point, you're doing TikTok dances is not like, I don't think that detracts from the serious work that you also do. Not that TikTok dancing is not serious work. Let's be there's a whole skill set behind
It's
that
I was
that
about to
is
say I
very
can't do that
difficult.
shit. Yeah.
It's you have to be very mindful and intentional, and I'm not trying to say that there's not a skill set there. But what I mean is that the TikTok dance doesn't necessarily equate to better literacy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But to your point, I think that you can do the TikTok dancing and also have the serious, deeper conversations that you're having on your show because you are multi-platformed
Yeah.
and because you have the bandwidth to be able to recognize what those particular platforms are for. And so if you're synergizing those platforms together, I think you can be both TikTok dancy and also have deep conversations that
Yeah.
move the needle toward that critical literacy that we all want. I probably will never TikTok dance because I'm not so interested in the performativity, to draw an audience to my show so that my show can get bigger and like I can pay myself more money. It doesn't matter if I have 3,000 listeners or if I have 3 million listeners, I'm going to still do the same, sometimes very stupid shit that I do with my show. I'm still going to ask the same fucking questions over and over and over. That's not going to change.
Yeah.
My hope is that the platform grows because people want to hear that kind of a conversation
Right.
and want that kind of depth. And I'm just going to let it grow as organically as it does, continue to do the work that I want to walk this road. And I don't know. I keep telling my parents, like, I'm just going to walk this road until I see where it goes
Yeah.
because I'm still curious as to what that path leads to.
Yeah. And like I think for me though, it's like the last this is the last thing about the TikTok dancey bit or just like I think it's the urge to be of the moment and like go viral for lack of better word. Like
Oh,
even I'm
sure.
struggling to figure out the terminology around what it is exactly.
Yeah.
But it's a little I feel like I've talked about this before, but like the fall of Twitter, like really dispersed
Uh-huh.
where everybody was at
Yep.
socially and like reaching an audience and reaching people. Because there's nothing
Yeah.
cooler than like to me whenever somebody's like, "Oh, I heard what you said about this book. I picked it up and I loved it based on your recommendation." Like that's my bread and butter.
Dude,
That's the high I'm
biggest
chasing.
honor in the world.
Yeah, that's the high I'm chasing every day of my life, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
then whenever you lose the the platform or the means by which that was working really well,
Yeah.
in the way that we have with the fall of like Twitter and everybody dispersed and there's no like real centralized social media anymore. And then like I feel like ever since then it's just been like a lot of like guesswork as to getting the engagement back to like reach
Yeah.
people. But the problem is like everything is just turned bite-sized now. Everything is just the attention
Yeah.
span is whittling down and down and down. And so like
Yeah.
you have to be witty and punchy and
Yeah.
showy in order to grab the attention and then maybe hope that people hold on long enough
Yeah.
to get to the long-winded review or the interview or whatever. But no,
Yeah.
I mean like I'm totally with you. Like I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing with the podcast and I still
Yeah.
write my long reviews in my posts. I ain't stopping that shit. I mean that's
Right.
gonna you have to pry that out of my cold dead hands. You know what I mean?
Well, and
Um
Anna, this is what I really admire about you is first off your tenacity to look at a platform and think, what is my platform? What's my voice? What's my craft?
mhm.
And then to put so much of yourself into all of these different elements of craft because it is craft to be able to sit down and make an Instagram video about your writing process and how hard it is to spell the word restaurant.
Restaurant.
You know, like there's craft in composing that sort of material that gets us to laugh and engage and relate to our own writing processes. I think there's value in that, and there's also craft in the long form book review, and there's craft to the ability to lead a conversation in a podcast. That's so hard to do, and takes an enormous amount of time. So like I feel like what I see you doing is throwing yourself at all of these different elements of craft because you're trying to build your voice, you're trying to build your multi-platform presence in a way that again, kind of cleaves back in that direction of what is it that I want to do, to say, to contribute? What do I want? And not only that, who do I want to bring with me
Yeah.
on that journey? Because I see, yes, I know you need to eat, but I also see that what you're trying to do is bring people with you. You're
Oh yeah.
trying to bring in community because we're better for that, you know?
Oh my God, yeah.
Like,
But
yeah,
like, but to your point though, but like I've picked that up from you. Like, like we've the whole, rising seas lift boats, whatever. I don't even know what the freaking analogy is, but rising tides lift all boats. I don't know. The
right,
good
right.
things that we
Yeah,
do raise
right.
everybody up. But there's a lot to be said for like kind of sometimes being precious with your work and sometimes not. And like you were somebody who was like very on board with what I was hoping to achieve very early on. And then like you brought
Mm.
me on to your like year of the end show and like like two was that 2 years ago? Or was that a year
I
ago?
said I don't I have you know what? I don't even know.
Well, anyway, it happened.
I think it
But
was 2 years ago. Yeah.
at any rate, it happened and then like, there were a lot of people who made sure I was part of the conversation so like that could
Yeah.
be had. So I think that we, for the most part, I do think that the community, the podcasting community that we have is pretty cool about, getting each other involved. And
Yeah.
that's really important to me, and it's important to you too. Because, like, there are so many times that you're like, hey, have you heard of this? I think it needs to be on your radar. And, like,
Mhm.
I try to extend the same courtesy, but sometimes you're just more ahead of the ball than I am on those things. But, like, what do you feel like it's always been like, I'm curious how you have seen the podcasting landscape change at all. And because I do feel like there are a lot of podcasting options these days. There's a
Sure.
lot of voices in podcasting, but
Yeah, I there were two things when I was starting off that I saw happen kind of simultaneously.
hmm
First of all, Agatha Andrews over on She Wore Black podcast, she was kind of starting up that podcast around the same time that I was starting up mine. She had a lot more experience with podcasting because
yeah.
she's been podcasting for who knows how long, much longer than I have. I think she's like even a decade ago, she was podcasting. And so she did the same thing that I did with you, which was just sharing a couple of inspiring words and kind of getting involved in offering some commentary, showing me some skill sets, sharing some resources, and she was in that space building community, not just for me, for a lot of different people.
hmm
And so if it's like you feel like you learned something from me, it's because I was encouraged to do the thing that I wanted to do
hmm
by Agatha Andrews.
Yeah.
And, from that, I think there are, so many different voices that she lifts up and so many voices that I want to lift up too. Like if I could spend all of my time just pinpointing the people who have come into my orbit and being like, you rock and I want eyes on you, then I would spend all of my time doing that. Um, and so I have been a beneficiary of that kind of charity.
hmm
Same thing with Neil over
Yeah.
at Talking Scared. Neil assisted my show in giving me some critical shout outs of giving me a tip or two at a StokerCon, and I've had people like Stephanie, step up kind of behind the scenes and tell me something like in a moment when I was like, I don't even know what the fuck I'm doing.
Yeah.
None of what I am doing makes any sense. I don't know that anyone is even listening to my show at all. And then she comes up to me at a StokerCon and she says, why aren't you on these panels?
Yeah.
Like you're doing really amazing work. Clay McLeod Chapman came up to me at a CircuitCon and cornered me, literally cornered
I
me,
can see.
and told me that, he was like, you're doing more than anyone else in this room, and like hearing that from the people that I admire, whose
Yeah.
platforms are so much bigger, like that is directly influenced the growth of my platform and my ability to continue to grow and to feel more confident in what it is that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so like I've been a beneficiary of all of that, and I continue to be like, I want to spread this wealth. I
Yeah.
don't want to keep these dollars in my pocket. I want other people to be able to find their voice in their platform too, because I truly do believe that the world gets bigger, the world gets better, the world becomes more of the thing that I want to see when I look out my window when that happens.
Yeah. I could
Simultaneous.
agree
Oh,
more with that, all of that, but
yeah, and simultaneously on the opposite end of that, I saw as the time or around the time that we were starting up and kind of getting a little bit of momentum with Sley House Presents, there was this other show, Curator of Horror. Uh, and I don't even remember what the name of his show was, but this dick, Chance Forshee, he came in and he just like made the worst kind of show possible,
oh God, yeah.
where it was a pure act of egotism on his part. And in that act of egotism, attempted to predate on some women that had, come on to his show and tried to give him their trust. And so, like I feel like that was a picture like so clear about the kind of show that is destructive
Yeah.
and the kind of thing that is not welcome, the kind of thing that is disruptive and destructive to community rather
Yeah.
than building it up. And that act of egotism was so gross and so awful and hurt people, real people
Yeah.
through that process. And so, that was kind of like, well, I know where the I know where my field is, I know what I do not ever want to partake in. And I know the kind of thing that I wish to avoid. And so it becomes that much easier to spot the kind of people that I do think are doing the work that I want to be in this space, and also the kind of people that I don't feel are worth our efforts to prop up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it sucks that there's a what not to be example like that's that tangible, but I
Yeah.
mean, it to have the positive guiding light really, also in stark contrast seeing that, it's two very different sides of the spectrum of what I feel like all of us that I've mentioned so far are hoping to accomplish by doing this work.
Yeah.
And I have to, I didn't even intentionally mean to do this when I started doing this series. But it's really funny because it's like I talked to Agatha and I got like her, you know what I mean? Like, and everybody is like pointing at one another, and I couldn't have planned that if I tried. Like, um, I couldn't have input like, put the book in anybody's ear. But yeah, no, it's really funny that it is that way, and it's really endearing that it is that way, that, it's a little bit more circular. You know, you know,
Yeah.
that nature of it. It's nice
You know,
that it's good company.
Yes, and also in all of our defense, because I do think we're constantly pointing fingers at each other because we pay attention. We see what one another is doing. But what I love about all of that group is that it's not cliquish. They really will step out for anyone that they feel is in it.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
that they feel is kind of quote unquote doing the work.
yeah,
And so their openness to be guides, their openness to being cheerleaders and to like you say, raise all boats,
yeah,
I think is really inspiring. And that's one of the things that I do hope continues happening.
yeah.
When we look at like the world of podcasting, I hope that there are more people out there that want to take up this sort of thing, that
Hmm.
want to be in it because they're passionate about literature, they're passionate about literacy, they're passionate about having real conversations
Yeah.
about the stuff in our lives that we're not sure what to do with.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too, this occurred to me just now, but like the common thread amongst all of us is like we are one people shows. Like,
Mm,
I know that some of us have had co-hosts before, and like, but in the end, it kind of ends up being a little bit of a singular project. There's nothing like somebody who gets the work too,
yeah.
who knows when you
Yeah.
are producing, hosting, editing,
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
marketing, you're doing it all. And for that reason, I think that we're all pretty transparent about it. And that's, I think, our eagerness to spread the love, so to speak, is because we know that it's a lot of work and there's a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
like intricacies to all of this of what we do. And so like if you could lessen the load for one other person to like not have to learn by trial and error, like
Yeah.
what happens whenever you lose a recording or
Yeah,
like
and but also think of what is gained in
yeah.
that process, Um I started producing another show because
Hmm.
I actually the Sley House is more of a network now, and I think that's maybe invisible to some folks because I am so very present in Sley House Presents, but
Yeah.
I also have Books and Badgers, which is a Redwall show. It's
Yeah.
like just a read along where we just talk about old Redwall books that I read when I was a kid. And it's a lot of fun. And we have a growing community that pays attention to that. But I also started producing a show for my local bookstore
Oh, nice.
called Real or Not Real. And it is a Hunger Games chapter by chapter deep dive
Interesting.
where
Okay.
just 1 hour episodes of just breaking apart a singular chapter in the Hunger Games series. And they're
Interesting.
in the middle of catching fire now. And they wanted to start that show, but neither of the two hosts had any idea how to do any of that work. They
Yeah.
didn't know anything about, how do we host it? How do we do sound editing? How do we do any of that? And I was like, you know what? I have that skill set and you don't need to worry about it. Just send me your audio files and I will make sure that everything gets edited and released at the end of the week.
Yeah.
And you let me handle all of that. You focus on just doing the show.
Hmm.
And what that has enabled is now there is truly a marvelous Hunger Games show out there that I know because I've seen the fan mail coming in for that
Yeah.
show, are like a bunch of 8 year or eighth graders who love the Hunger Games, are getting into it for the first time and have a podcast where they can begin to explore with real deep, fundamental critical literacy skills. The kind of reading that is what you and I do so fluidly throughout our week.
Yeah.
And if I weren't there, to step forward and say, I want to do this, I'm not going to say that the show would never have happened, but I think of that eighth grader who never would have connected with the material as deeply, who never would have had the sense of community right there at her fingertips, to connect to the stuff that she loves. And what an impoverishment that is. What a resource taken away from that community if someone weren't there to enable that to happen. And that's how I feel. Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's about opening doors because when you open a door for someone else, like you never know what you're admitting and what can flourish, what can grow from that. So I don't know. This is my speech by way of saying open
Of
doors.
course. Yeah.
Yeah, think
Yeah.
of what you can pay forward and understand that maybe you may never bask in the shadow of that tree, but it matters.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it goes with the a little bit with the leaving things better than you find them, or found them mentality
Yeah.
of just trying to, do something good, and that sounds really simple and rudimentary, but I mean it's, it's a philosophy, and I think that it is a lingering philosophy for that reason, and that you know, without doing that, you don't have community. And then without community, you have isolation. And that's whenever all the really bad, deep, dark things that we love to read about
Yes.
really come into the fold and things
Yeah.
really get, upsetting and depressing and wonky. Um, so yeah, I'm with you. It's one of those things that, I don't know that I've really had the opportunity yet, and if I have and I've overlooked it, oh my God, I feel terrible. But I hope that one day, like I can lend a kind word or advice or ear to somebody to,
Well, I'm gonna say because I'm in your Discord. I think
this
I
is
I'm
true.
I'm
You
in your
are,
Patreon.
yeah.
I see what you do, and you are doing it more than you think you are.
Well, that's good to know.
Simply Yes, simply by doing things like this, introducing me to your listenership is, I mean, first off, what an honor that is, to be included in that group and to think of silly old me being some kind of a resource. I mean, that's such a wonderful thing to think about. But you don't just do that with people who are already established. Your Discord is full of people who don't have the same kind of establishment that you do, and you're building that network as we speak. There's an event as of recording that we're going to
Yeah.
be doing tonight in just 45 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
That is a resource that you're bringing to the people that have decided to connect with you.
Yeah.
That is an employment of your connections, of your resources in a way that, yes, that's opening doors, that's raising tides, that's lifting boats. So don't be hard on yourself.
Yeah, but Trevor, it feels you're not gonna tell me it's not a little selfish, like to get to do this kind of stuff because like it's one, this is the stuff that I enjoy. Like I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't enjoy it. So like there's that piece of it, right? But like, for me, I remember whenever I was coming on to the horror scene and like all the book clubs that I joined and like did read-alongs with and like all the
Mhm.
people I met that way. Like the whole entire thing that I'm hoping to do with the Patreon, and I'm really not trying to make this episode about me. It's supposed to be about you, Trevor, and Sley House. Jesus Christ. I'm
I
gonna
will
say this.
always turn. Listen, I love to turn things around. You're never gonna catch me not turning it around on the person right in front of me.
I mean, that's true. That's very true. You're very good at it. So I'm gonna say this piece and then we're moving on. But the thing with the Patreon that I have hoped to, it's like I almost don't want it to be. And I don't want to make any one promise to anybody that we're going to provide this one thing, like you pay X amount and then you get this every
Sure.
month. Like, yeah, there's
Yeah,
there's some
yeah,
things that you get, like maybe in the early episodes or whatever. But like I want to hear from people what they want. Like, what are you looking for
yeah,
that you are not able to get readily in this community, and how can we make
yeah.
it happen? Because I
Sure.
know for me, like I have questions about the writing process. I mean, I just made my stupid TikTok about it yesterday with all my dumping, but there are like some actual questions in that like I have luckily had the pleasure of knowing somebody to text and be like, "Hey, how long was your first draft, and how long did it take you to get through it of
Yeah,
your novel?" But
yeah,
not everybody, like when you're new on the scene or you don't know, you don't have that connection. And if I can be
yeah,
the bridge to that, then I certainly want to do that.
yeah.
Um, but I mean, it's all a really good time because it's all good people involved. So that's where it feels selfish.
It's not selfish. I really can't stress enough that, like you got to take care of yourself. You
Yeah,
have to take care of yourself. And yeah, you need to grow a community in order to do that. But that doesn't mean that this is only self-serving. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, okay,
yeah,
sure, maybe there's a small sliver of it that does enrich your life. But consider too the way that what you are doing as a service, because you are acting as a service, is improving the lives of the other people involved.
yeah.
You are providing something that they would not have had otherwise. And that
Allegedly,
is
allegedly.
valuable.
Allegedly. Anyway, but I want to pivot this back to you because it is supposed to be about Slay House. But you've said it yourself. Like the show has really blown up. Like you are one of the busiest readers that I know. You are talking to like really, really big names in horror and sci-fi and fantasy and
Mhm.
speculative fiction and just like all over the map and just these people who you're able to have these really, really deep conversations with. And we've talked about how you're able to go deep with them in
Mhm.
these moments because you're doing the work, and then two, the way that you talk about having that vocabulary, I think goes a long
Yeah.
way in having a deep conversation where, like you're conversing with somebody and y'all are actually speaking the same language, which is a big part of
Yeah.
interviewing. Like if you're talking
Oh
past
yeah.
somebody, you're not getting anywhere.
Right.
Um, but for like looking at the future of Slay House and what you're doing, I know you are like deep in it and you love it very much, but like what do you feel like the show is going to keep progress and your interviews are going to keep progressing in the same way? Is there like a new area you want to pivot into? Like what looking forward, what where's your mind with the podcast?
Yeah. I don't know.
Not that you
I
have to know. I
I
just
mean,
didn't know if there was like something
no,
you're like,
because
ooh, I want to try that.
in so many ways, I think that like I feel like I'm always putting the rails down in front of the moving train,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like there's so much of that where I just kind of like put out into the universe that like last year I was like I'd really love to talk to Sun Dean. I
Yeah.
think that would be great to do. And then that happened. And it's like so there are these little things that I keep moving forward, and as I move forward I'm like, I'll read a book and I'm like, you know what? I really want to talk to Becky Chambers.
Yeah.
I have no idea if that's going to fucking happen. I can't predict that it will, and I have to make peace with the fact that it may never happen. But simultaneously, I keep thinking about like, I don't know, what do I hunger for?
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, first off, I hunger for a literate world. You know, I
Yeah. Yeah.
hunger
Yeah.
for a world in which I can step outside, I see my neighbor, and I know that, we can have a conversation about whatever and meet each other from across the fence.
Yeah.
I think that matters. So, in service to that, I think that's my continued vision for the show is just how do I do that? What do I do? And what are the avenues toward some of that?
Yeah.
I think that my direction, things that I'm trying to do are like in expanding vocabulary, right? I'm really craving broader conversations about how we build those vocabularies and
Yeah.
like where do we look? What are the sorts of things that we can do practically aside from just like, oh, here's your curriculum. Go,
Yeah.
pick
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
all of these books, which I think is tough to do. Instead, what I'm doing is like, can I create entry points and invite a reader then to come try something a little bit new that maybe they haven't tried before. So I don't know entirely what that looks like. Again, it's so hard to depict like a master strategy when I
Yeah.
get 3 books a week mailed to me. And so part of it is like I'm still doing the same old thing that I've been doing, but I've been really blessed this summer to be able to structure more of my content around conversations that are particular to like science fiction and fantasy genres. And
Yeah.
I've decided, I'm kind of doing this series called The Summer of Science Fiction and Fantasy, and it's just conversations trying to open up a dialogue about like these genres and can we start to build a little bit of vocabulary around it. I've been blessed to be joined by Joe Walton and Ada Palmer, as I mentioned, and I've never been more out of my depth in an interview with people before as I was like trying to articulate things that I've never tried to articulate before with 2 people who are master articulators in these subject matters. So it was like that was such a wonderful experience for me because I was so out of my depth. And that's a growth opportunity, so I'm like, can I put myself more out of my depth and then see what I pick up along the way? But I
Yeah.
was also really blessed by I have a local writer friend, Marina Lostetter, who brought me to her writing group with some best-selling writers like Megan O'Keefe and uh, Andrea Stewart, both phenomenal writers in science fiction and fantasy, and the rest of their group, all of whom are really accomplished writers in their own right. And I did like basically like a big Worldcon panel, where like we just talk genre for an hour. And I feel like that's the sort of thing that I want more of is just how do I kick down the walls of this dirty old building and start to renovate into a space where readers can come in and learn something, try something a little new to, yes, find the stuff that they loved to begin with, but maybe begin to grow their vocabulary with me as I also struggle to build my own vocabulary.
Well, I mean, you bring up a really interesting thing, and it's probably going to be one of the last things that we talk about because it's kind of a good note to end on, I feel like. But I think that where you really went out in that scenario of that forward-thinking vision is the willingness and openness to be either wrong or to learn or to be vulnerable
Mm.
to not being the smartest person in the room. I think that we get in a lot of trouble when we're like, "Oh, I'm definitely, and it takes being in sometimes it takes being in an interview and being like, "Oh, fuck, I had no
Right.
idea what I was in
Yeah,
for
yeah.
with this conversation." Because I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like it's happened to all of us, right? Where we're like we
Oh
really think
yeah.
we know what something is and then come to find out it was not. Um,
Yeah.
but it takes it and like some of it I feel like it's the humbleness of it, yeah, but it's also the willing like there's nothing at all wrong about it, and there should be no shame in that. That's
Oh
why we're
yeah.
having the conversations. Like that
Right.
being, I
Yeah.
feel like, a lot of times in kind of ish this space, but like, or at least for me, it feels sometimes really, really important to be right. And that's something that I've learned to let go of. It's like it's
Hmm.
okay to sound a little not right on this. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and to your point, I think that modeling that growth
Yeah.
is meaningful. In a
Yeah,
world
that's
of
the whole thing of it.
yeah, in a world of influencing where it's like, toxic masculinity seems to be the most popular thing where you can just, talk about, I don't know, doing meth to keep
How
your
strong your
cheekbones
I was about to
sharp,
say how strong your jawbone is, yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's like the counterpoint is the vulnerability. The
Yeah.
counterpoint is modeling the process and recognizing that, when you sit down for an interview, it's not a perfect process.
Yeah.
I will listen back to an episode that I recorded with someone and catch entire lines of inquiry that I missed on the first go around. And I have to be able to recognize with myself, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's all right that you missed it because someone else will pick up on it. Someone else will have that conversation. Someone else will move that line forward for you. And there's always an opportunity to come back. There's always an opportunity to revisit. I know that when I say goodbye to a guest, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm saying goodbye to that guest forever.
Yeah.
I'm likely to end up crossing paths with them at some future point in which I could pursue that line of inquiry further if I needed to.
Yeah. It literally happened to me today. I listened back to something I said and I like cringed a little bit. It was like, oh girl, you were wrong.
It's
And
the hardest thing of editing any of my episodes is like Stephen Graham Jones will drop a fucking bomb on me and I go, "Oh,
but you can't keep
man."
up, dude. No, nobody's up to Stephen
Well,
Graham
no.
Jones' speed of like you can't look. If you hit like 5 out of 10, if you are 50% keeping up with that man, then you are doing mighty
Right.
fine, Um,
But this is the thing, again, it comes back to that issue of vocabulary.
yeah,
Like Stephen Graham Jones has the vocabulary that he has because he has diligently worked in
yeah,
his space to be the master craftsman that he is. And that is inspiring. And it's not embarrassing to then have conversation with him and recognize that maybe you don't know what he knows, but you could get there.
yeah,
You can practice.
yeah. Well, you just gotta keep picking up books like his and the ones that he recommends, and then maybe
Yes.
you'll get there, like
Yeah.
listening to the things that the people who are saying, like paying attention to what they're saying,
Yeah.
and being willing to admit that you were wrong is a huge
Right.
part of that.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
You're
But
totally
no,
right.
I feel like if that's one thing that I've been kind of taking away recently, and one thing I really admire about you and your conversation that we're having right now about this is that willingness to learn, like, and learning means failing. You're not gonna win all the time. So
Yes.
it's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, but nonetheless, we must. Thank you so much, Trevor, for making the time to
And
chat about your work, your craft, everything that you do, because I listen to your show. I'm a really big fan of your show, and more than anything, I'm a fan of your work ethic because I can't keep up with how many episodes you've got coming out. I mean, I think I'm still in the episode with Luke Dumas, which is like over a month ago now.
oh man. Yeah. Yeah. Well, number one, don't feel like you ever have to keep up with my crazy because like those episodes exist. They will exist in perpetuity. You can come back to them at any point in time. But Anna, thank you for this act of recognition. This goes such a distance in I don't know, just making me feel like I'm less alone at my computer, pounding away at, the next interview and trying to figure out what any of this means. That is a genuine gift to be able to I don't know, just sit here and receive the things that you've said to me. And I hope to always reciprocate that gift tenfold back to you
Oh, you do.
as I listen to all of your episodes too. And I think about the way that you interview and the way that your voice is so valuable and the things that I could do in order to continue to grow my own voice. I learn as much from you as you say you learn from me. And I think that that's such a wonderful, beautiful thing. And I'm so grateful to have you in this space doing the things that you do, highlighting the people that you highlight and the issues that you give voice to. It's
Thank you.
all of it immaculate. And I'm so proud of the work that you do. I'm so excited to be in this space with you.
Thank you, Trevor. You always give the most heartfelt compliments. So like hearing this kind of stuff is always, it's very, very special and it means a lot. But yeah, I think that, our own community, it's like I want to give us like a podcasters week. Like that we should do
Yeah,
this
yeah,
like
yeah.
every year where we just like we all kind of highlight one another and we like air our grievances. It's like a podcast festivus where we air our grievances and we
Oh,
reconvene as a
yes.
group.
Yes.
Um, but no, I genuinely I appreciate the kind words and everything else that's behind them. The support that you give behind the scenes is moves the needle tenfold. But also just your willingness to come on and just share with everybody that in itself is a huge deal. So thank you so very much, everybody. If you have not listened to Sley House Presents, it is available wherever you get your podcasts. Trevor is releasing episodes like a madman. So there is probably an author on there or a book that you've read that you can listen to an author interview on. So I highly encourage everybody to do that. Thank you so much again, Trevor.
You are so welcome. Anytime.
And per usual, another massive thank you to Trevor for coming on the show and for his generosity, getting to have a conversation with a fellow podcaster and somebody like Trevor who takes the job so seriously and is so immersed in it. Means everything, and it's so invigorating to kind of have these conversations where we check in with one another. And like I mentioned in the conversation, he's always so generous with his compliments, so it's always just a really heartening time to get to do these things. And I'm so thrilled that I got the chance to bring him back on the show. And we should do it all the time. We should do it more often. So I'll always be looking for those opportunities. If you haven't listened to Sley House Presents before, please go do. There's so many quality, insightful conversations that Trevor fosters on that podcast. I am begging you all to go listen. The conversation that he had with Chuck Tingle last summer is still a hallmark conversation for me. Please go listen to it. It is so, so good. There aren't even words to describe it. But yeah, go give it a listen. Pivoting to the here and now, we are in the last week of the Darker Times subscriber drive, and we have been working really, really hard to bring you guys some quality pieces to be posting a lot on social media, and we're going to be doing that for the rest of this week. And I hope that you all come give us a quick peek, a quick look on darkertimes.com to see what we're all about. I really love everything that we've been working on and everything that we've been doing. It's been a big push to get the subscriber drive rolling and get paid subscribers for the site because we are worker owned. So getting you guys' support has just been everything. And yeah, just watch my social media for more of those posts, more promotion, and more details. If you want to become a paid subscriber, I will definitely have more information listed on my social media about those things. Looking forward to next week. I'll be back with some more interviews. I'm really enjoying sharing these podcaster interviews, and I hope that you all are too. They're a real treat to be speaking amongst peers. So it's a really, really cool thing that I get to do, and I'm very fortunate that I have some friends who are willing to come along and do that with me. Additionally, I just finished school, so I'm trying to get my life back in order after finishing that up. And I'm in the editing trenches, so on my novelish thing. So I'm very busy these days. I'm so thrilled that I still get to do all of this. And yeah, thank you all so much for supporting the show, for sharing on social media, for staying in touch. You all are the best. And until next week, I will see you all then.